In the autumn of the year 1002, a single royal decision would lead to one of the darkest days in English history. What really happened on Brice's day, and why did it change the fate of a kingdom? Welcome to Raymond's History. I'm Raymond, and today we explore this powerful story together. If you enjoy thoughtful history like this, please consider subscribing and sharing the video with others who love the past as much as you do. Some of the visuals you will see are symbolic reconstructions and may not perfectly match every detail of the story, so thank you for your understanding. I hope this journey into the past brings you a moment of reflection, curiosity, and calm. In the final years of the 10th century, England was living under a shadow of fear. For decades, Viking raiders from Scandinavia, especially from Denmark, had attacked the English coasts and rivers. These were not small, isolated raids. Entire fleets arrived, burning towns, looting monasteries, and carrying away wealth that had taken generations to build. Communities across the kingdom learned to live with the constant possibility that ships might appear on the horizon without warning. King Æthelred II faced an enormous challenge. His armies struggled to stop these attacks, and the kingdom was often unprepared. In an attempt to protect his people and prevent further destruction, the king agreed to pay large sums of money known as Danegeld. The idea was simple. The payments were meant to persuade Viking leaders to leave England in peace. But peace proved fragile. Even after these payments, new raids continued, and confidence in the king's ability to defend the realm began to weaken. As the pressure grew, so did suspicion. Reports reached Æthelred that Danish men already living within England might be involved in a dangerous conspiracy. According to these warnings, some were believed to be planning to kill the king and his advisors and take control of the kingdom. Whether every detail was true or not, the fear it created inside the royal court was very real, and it would soon lead to one of the darkest decisions in English history. By the year 1002, King Æthelred II believed that the danger inside his kingdom had grown too great to ignore. Viking attacks continued to haunt England, and trust between the English population and Danish settlers was fragile. Many Danes had lived in England for years as traders, mercenaries, or settlers. But fear and suspicion were spreading rapidly through the royal court. Advisors warned the king that some Danish men living within the kingdom might support future Viking invasions or even take part in a plot against him. On November 13 inches, the year 1002, the feast day of St. Brice, Æthelred made a decision that would echo through history. He issued an order that Danish men living in territories under his control were to be killed. The instruction appears in a royal charter, written a few years later, where the king justified his action by claiming that the Danes had grown like weeds among the wheat of England. To Æthelred and his supporters, the order was presented as an act of protection for the kingdom. They believed that removing those they saw as a threat would restore stability and security, yet the decision also revealed how deeply fear had taken hold of the royal government. Instead of bringing safety, this command unleashed violence in several towns and cities, setting the stage for events that would soon become known as the Brice's Day Massacre. One of the most tragic scenes connected to the Order of 1002 unfolded in the city of Oxford. At the time, Oxford was an important settlement in Anglo-Saxon England, with churches that served not only as places of worship but also as sanctuaries where people could seek protection during moments of danger. When violence began to spread following the king's command, several Danish men in the city rushed toward the church of Frideswide, hoping that the sacred tradition of sanctuary would save their lives. In medieval Christian society, churches were often respected as places where bloodshed should not occur. People believed that those who reached a holy building could claim the mercy of God and the protection of the church. The Danish group forced their way inside and closed the doors behind them, likely believing that the crowd outside would hesitate to violate such a sacred place. But the tension and anger in the city had already grown too intense. According to historical accounts, the crowd surrounding the church could not break through the strong doors. Instead, they turned to a far more destructive solution. They set fire to the wooden structure of the building. Flames quickly spread through the church, filling the air with smoke and heat. Those trapped inside had no way to escape, As the fire consumed the timbers of the roof, the structure eventually collapsed, killing the people who had taken shelter within. What had been a place of prayer and refuge became the site of one of the most haunting moments of the Street Brice's Day violence. For many centuries, stories about the violence of Street Brice's Day were known mainly through medieval chronicles. Some historians once wondered whether the descriptions might have been exaggerated. Then, in the early 21st century, archaeology began to reveal powerful physical evidence that brought these events back into the light. In 2008, archaeologists working at St John's College in Oxford uncovered a mass grave containing the remains of 37 individuals. The discovery immediately drew attention because the skeletons did not belong to a normal medieval cemetery. Most of the remains were young men, many between the ages of 16 and 25. Scientific analysis of their teeth and bones suggested that they had grown up in Scandinavia, rather than in England. The injuries on the skeletons told a disturbing story. Many bones showed deep cuts from bladed weapons, and several wounds had been delivered from behind, suggesting that some of the victims were struck while trying to escape. Researchers also found signs of burning on some of the remains. This detail closely matches the historical account of Danish men who had taken refuge in St Frideswide's church during the violence in Oxford. Another important discovery came from Ridgeway Hill in Dorset. There, archaeologists found a mass burial containing 54 Scandinavian males. The evidence suggested a very different kind of killing. These men had been stripped of their clothing and executed by decapitation. The cuts on the bones show that the executioner struggled to deliver clean blows, striking several times before finally separating the head. Together, these discoveries offer powerful confirmation that the violence of 1002 was not simply legend but a real and brutal episode in early English history. The story of the St Brice's Day killings is also connected to one of the most debated figures in this history, a woman named Gunhilde. According to later medieval traditions, Gunhilde was the sister of the Danish king Sweyn Forkbeard. Some accounts claim that she had been living in England as a political hostage, possibly connected to earlier agreements between English and Danish leaders. During the violence of 1002, the tradition says that Gunhilde and her husband Palig were killed, along with other Danes. If this story were completely accurate, the emotional impact would have been enormous. Sweyn Forkbeard was already a powerful ruler in Denmark and an experienced leader of Viking forces. The death of a close family member could easily have turned a political conflict into something far more personal. Many later writers believed that this tragedy became one of the reasons behind the fierce Danish retaliation that followed. However, modern historians approach this story with caution. The earliest sources describing the massacre do not clearly mention Gunhilde, and some scholars believe that the tale may have developed later as a way to explain the scale of Danish revenge. Even so, the legend continued to circulate for centuries and became deeply connected to the memory of the event. Whether Gunhilde truly died during the massacre, or whether the story grew through later storytelling, the broader historical outcome is clear. In the years after 1002, Danish attacks against England intensified. Sweyn Forkbeard launched major campaigns across the English countryside, and the conflict between the two kingdoms grew far more destructive than before. In this sense, the violence of St Brice's Day did not end the danger facing England. Instead, it helped ignite a new and even more devastating phase of war. Instead of bringing the safety that King Æthelred had hoped for, the violence of 1002 helped push England into an even more dangerous period. News of the killings spread quickly across the North Sea. In Denmark, King Sweyn Forkbeard was already a powerful ruler with strong connections to Viking warriors who had long targeted the rich lands of England. After the events of St Brice's Day, the conflict between the two sides grew far more intense. In the year 1003, Sweyn Forkbeard launched a series of large-scale raids against England. These attacks were not small coastal strikes like many earlier Viking raids. Danish forces moved deep into the countryside, burning towns and collecting tribute, while the English kingdom struggled to organize an effective defense. Year after year, the pressure increased, and the authority of King Æthelred continued to weaken. The situation finally reached a turning point in 1013. Sweyn Forkbeard led a major campaign that forced much of England to submit to his rule. King Æthelred was driven from the country and sought refuge in Normandy. For a brief time, it seemed that Danish power would completely replace the old Anglo-Saxon leadership. Although Æthelred later returned for a short period, the balance of power had already changed. In 1016, Sweyn's son Canute became King of England. His reign marked the beginning of a new political era, showing how the decisions of 1002 had helped open the door to the end of Anglo-Saxon dominance. Looking back across more than 1,000 years, the events of Brice's day stand as one of the darkest turning points in early English history. What began as a decision meant to protect a kingdom instead deepened division and violence. King Æthelred believed that removing a perceived threat would restore order. Yet history shows that fear and suspicion can lead leaders toward choices that create far greater consequences than they expect. For many historians, this moment reveals how fragile political stability was in late Anglo-Saxon England. A kingdom already struggling with Viking raids and internal tensions responded with an act that only intensified the conflict. Instead of ending the danger, the massacre helped ignite the chain of events that eventually brought Danish kings to the English throne. Today, the most powerful reminders of this tragedy are not found only in written chronicles, but in the ground itself. The skeletons discovered in Oxford and Dorset offer quiet but undeniable evidence of the violence that took place in the year 1002. These remains belong to real people who lived through that moment of fear and chaos. As we study them today, they continue to speak across the centuries, reminding us how decisions made in moments of panic can shape the fate of entire nations. As we reach the end of this story, I personally find the Brice's Day massacre to be one of the most haunting moments in early English history. It shows how fear and mistrust can shape decisions that echo across generations. What King Æthelred believed would protect his kingdom instead helped trigger greater conflict and eventually change the future of England. The remains discovered in Oxford and Dorset still stand as quiet witnesses to that tragedy in the year 1002. Before we close, I would like to share that many of the visuals in this video were created with the help of artificial intelligence to make the historical narrative easier to imagine for modern viewers. Thank you for exploring this history with me. I'm Raymond from Raymond's History. If this video meant something to you, please like, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. I would also love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to join the discussion in the comments.